Hey everyone, today I wanted to dive into a topic that doesn't get enough attention: fighters that lost their aura in 2024. And you're probably asking, what do I mean by aura? It's that special vibe that certain fighters have when they're on a roll. The feeling that they're untouchable, unstoppable, and just on a different level. Think about like Anderson Silva in his prime. The guy just felt invincible. Now, not all fighters with aura are champions. Some just carry themselves in a different way that makes them feel like they're operating on another plane. But eventually, whether through losing streaks, tough matchups, or just time catching up, that aura can fade. So today, I wanted to talk about some fighters who had that special edge but seem to have lost it. Whether it's recent struggles or a string of losses, let's jump into it. Alright, the first guy we have on the list is Benoit Saint Denis. And what happened to his aura? When he first came onto the scene, he had that thing, the gritty, unbreakable vibe. The nickname God of War wasn't just for show. It really felt like this dude was built different. Remember his UFC debut? He took a ridiculous amount of damage and just wouldn't quit. Fans love it because it made him seem like that kind of guy who can take whatever you threw at him and just still keep coming. Then he started building some hype, stringing together wins over guys like Matt Vervola and Thiago Moises. Solid wins, right? He was gaining traction, and people were starting to think, alright, this guy might really be something. But then came Dustin Poirier. The Dustin Poirier fight was weird, man. I swear that Dustin didn't even take it seriously. The dude was trying like 4 or 5 guillotine attempts and throwing some wild, uncharacteristic strikes. It felt like Dustin was experimenting or just not giving Benoit the respect you expect. He didn't look like this unstoppable force we were all hyped up for. Then came the Moicano fight, and that was the real turning point. Moicano didn't just beat up Benoit, he absolutely dismantled him. It was one of those fights where you're like, oh yeah, there are levels to this. Moicano exposed all the hoes in Benoit's game and made him look completely out of his depth. After that, the whole God of War mystique is kind of gone. Fans stopped seeing him as this unrelentless killer and more like someone who could just be figured out and broken. At this point, I honestly think someone like Paddy Pimblett could beat him. And I'm not saying that Paddy is a top tier guy, but Benoit doesn't intimidate anyone anymore. Once you lose that aura, it's hard to get it back. It's like the blueprint to beat him is out there now, and everybody knows it now. Alright, now the next guy we have is Charles Oliveira. He's still that guy, but let's be honest, his aura has taken a bit of a hit. Back in 2021 to late 2022, he had this almost mystical vibe about him. Sure, he would get dropped, but eventually every time, it felt like he was just setting the stage for one of those crazy comebacks. It was like watching a movie where you knew the hero was gonna win, no matter how bad things looked. That stretch made him feel unstoppable. But here's where things started to shift. The loss to Islam Makhachev was a big moment. Islam didn't just beat Charles, he dominated him in a way that kind of shattered that untouchable image. It was the first time in a long time where it felt like Charles just didn't have the answers. And then you got the Arman Tsarukyan stepping up into the spotlight, showing that the lightweight division is full of these young, hungry killers who aren't scared of anyone. Fighters like Arman made you realize the division is evolving fast, and Charles doesn't have the same unbeatable aura that he once did. Now, don't get me wrong, Charles still has that aura. He's still dangerous. He's still one of the most exciting fighters in the game, and no one can underestimate him. But it's diminished. Back in his prime run, guys stepped into the cage already a little bit intimidated by the idea that no matter what they threw at him, he'll find a way to win. Now, after that Islam and that loss to Arman, that fear factor isn't quite the same. Fighters see him as beatable, even if they still respect his skills. So yeah, he's still elite, still one of the best lightweights ever, but that aura of being untouchable, it's not what it used to be. Alright, now it's time for the next person that's on the list, and that's Sergey Pavlovich. Man, there was a time when people were calling this guy the white Francis Ngannou, and honestly, it wasn't just hype. The dude's entire game plan was as simple as it was. It was terrifying. He would walk forward and absolutely wreck anyone in his path. And for a while, it worked. He wasn't just winning, he was obliterating guys, from putting down 2 of the biggest dudes in the division like Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa to running through Curtis Blades like it was nothing. Sergey looked unstoppable. And here's the craziest part. He was doing it all in the first round. Every single time. And at one point, people were straight up fantasizing about him fighting John Jones or even matching him up with Francis Ngannou. It was like the biggest showdown everyone wanted to see. The guy is a giant Russian powerhouse against the scariest guys in the sport. But then reality hit. Entered Tom Aspinall. Tom didn't just beat Sergey, he destroyed him, and he did it in one round. Sergey's aura of being this unstoppable force, it cracked that night. Suddenly people weren't looking at him the same way anymore. Now I thought, alright, maybe he can bounce back. Everyone takes a loss. He'll figure it out, right? But then came Alexander Volkov. Volkov didn't just beat him, he schooled him. 3 rounds of absolute domination. It was like Sergey didn't even belong in there. That's when I knew it was over. The aura, the mystique, whatever you want to call it, it was gone. He went from being this wrecking machine to looking like a guy who couldn't hang with the top of the division anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, he's still dangerous, he still got power, and you can't count him out completely, but that killer vibe he had, it's not there anymore. Fighters aren't scared of him like they used to be. Anyways, let's talk about the next guy on the list, and that is Henry Cejudo. Man, what a legacy this dude had, being the key word here. We all know the story, Olympic gold medalist, double champion, retired on top, and at one point, people were legitimately calling him one of the top 10, maybe even top 15 greatest fighters of all time. And honestly, it was hard to argue with that. He had wins over Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes. He looked unstoppable. And then he walked away. But then he came back last year, and yeah, things haven't been the same. First, he fought Aljamain Sterling, and to be fair, Aljo was the reigning champion and one of the best in the division. Henry put up a decent fight, but let's be real, he didn't look like the Cejudo we remembered. Then he set his sights on Merab Dvalishvili, but then he got absolutely smoked. The fact that he's been calling out these killers while looking less confident in the process just doesn't hit the same. And here's the thing, losing to a guy like Aljo and Merab isn't shameful. They're the best in the division right now. But it still hurts Henry's legacy. When you're a guy who retires at the top, claiming to be one of the GOATs, and then you come back and don't dominate, it changes how people see you. That aura of being a guy who could do it all, wrestling, striking, game planning, it's not as strong anymore. And in my opinion, if he takes another loss, it's really gonna dent his legacy. And let's be honest, it's kind of sad because it's not like Henry falls off dramatically or got exposed as a fraud. It's just that the sport moves forward while he was gone. Now, instead of being solidified in the top 10 and top 15 of all time conversation, you really have to kind of like reevaluate it now. Now, the next person we have is Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill definitely lost his aura after that fight with Alex Pereira. Getting knocked out in just a few minutes was rough, especially because going into that fight, he looked sharp and aggressive, like he was ready to prove something. Up until then, he only had one loss in the UFC to Paul Craig, and even then, he bounced back strong. I mean, knocking out Johnny Walker, finishing Santos, and dominating Glover to win the belt. That was a solid run. But man, getting folded like that, it's hard to bounce back from, especially when he started complaining and making excuses after that fight. It just kind of took away from that confidence and no nonsense vibe he used to have. And if we're gonna be honest, his resume isn't super stacked. Sure, Glover was a big win, but Glover was way past his prime by then. It's not like Hill has beaten a bunch of killers to cement his legacy as that guy. Now, it feels like people are questioning if he really was ever that good to begin with, or if he just capitalized on the right opportunities at the right time. It's tough, man. Fighters lose all the time, but the way you handle it can definitely break your reputation, and Hill definitely took a hit there. Alright, so the next fighter we have on the list is Sean O'Malley, and I gotta say, after his fight with Merab Dvalishvili, it felt like he lost a lot of aura. Before that fight though, people thought this dude was practically untouchable, like his counter striking, his height, his reach, that lanky frame, it all just made him look good, and like a nightmare matchup for anyone in the division. Plus, his performance against Chito Vera and Aljo, man, they were incredible, like he had this unbeatable vibe about him. But then Merab came in and just dominated him 50-45. It's not like Sean's career is over or anything. It's just that it really put a dent in his image. And then after that fight, Sean's out here saying, I won. I mean, he's either trolling us or he's just next level delusion. And the last person we have in the list is Kelvin Kattar. And man, I gotta admit, I really feel bad for this guy. There was a time where people actually talked about him like he can actually become the champion. And people used to say that this guy was the best boxer in the division. And honestly, he was really good. I still think he's good, but at this point, I think it's safe to say he's never going to touch the belt. It's tough to watch because in my opinion, he lost all his aura as a top contender. I mean, yeah, he got folded by Max and that was rough. But let's be real, that was arguably the best version of Max we've ever seen. Calvin bounced back with that win over Giga, and people started believing in him again. But then he lost a split decision to Josh Emmett. Then he got injured against Arnold Allen, and now he got folded by Aljo, which honestly shocked me. And a lot of people thought Kattar had that one in the bag. Now, when I look at him, I just see another gatekeeper in the division. He's not getting a title shot, and it feels like he never quite lived up to the potential he showed early on. All that hype and aura he had is gone. It's just sad to see, man, but that's pretty much my list. What do you guys think of that? Did I miss anybody? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like always, guys, I'll see you guys on my next one.